You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Horror Ramblings. What's this thing called again? Oh yeah, the Horror Ramblings Podcast. I'm your host, Lester. Unfortunately, Steven's not here today. He's in the nether regions fighting off zombie hordes or something along those lines. I'm not really sure what he's doing. All I know is he had a chainsaw, a shotgun, a couple of pistols, and some other things that I can't mention on the show because we might get kicked off of the airwaves if that happens to be the case. So today, I am joined by my wife. Hi, Samantha.
You guys gotta get a little bit more creative with where the other person is.
With our excuses?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah, well. Steven's not here to bounce ideas off of, and if you want to come up...
I job liver?
You come up with an idea, then.
No.
Exactly. So don't even start, lady.
I came up with
Yeah, I suppose you did. But anyways, everybody, the missus and I were talking the other day, and we got to talking about horror movies, which you're not a big fan of. Let's be honest.
No, we had a whole episode on that.
Yeah, we had a whole episode on that fun stuff. But you have a handful of horror films that you're okay with. But you made a good point about something. You made a point as to say, which is something we've talked about on the show before, but not in great detail. But if gore makes a horror film, or if gore is a little too much in a horror film. So I know you have a certain stance on that whole situation. I could go either way with it. Sometimes I enjoy watching a gory horror film, but I know you don't think that gore is necessary for a film like that, right?
No, if you have a good storyline, then you don't need the extra gore. Now, I am like anybody else, and I enjoy a good kill every once in a while, but I don't think that is what makes a good movie.
So would you say it's more like the build-up to it, right?
Or not mindless killing like the Halloween movie.
Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went to the movie theater to see that, and it's kind of become tradition. We didn't go see Halloween Ends in the theater. We didn't make it, but I know there was one scene in particular where he kept stabbing that guy with the knives. He kept taking the knives out of the butcher block and just kept stabbing the guy with knife after knife. You kind of looked at me and you're like, isn't this overkill? I mean, it was, but at the same time, it's the shock value of it, I guess, for some people.
That's like 2 knives in. That's not 60 knives in.
No.
Because at that point, it's what are you doing? But I also didn't like all of the firefighters, being brutally murdered on camera for no... Michael could have easily just walked out the back door.
Yeah, but that's not like Michael Myers. I mean, I get it.
He could kill anybody it was too easy of a kill, and he's probably one of my favorite slashers. So it's disappointing when his kills are used so mindlessly that they don't really stand for it.
Well, I get that from that standpoint, but I also get it from the standpoint of a horror fan who goes in just to see the kills, because these new Halloween films, they ignored everything that happened in all the other movies. So all of the kills that Michael made in all of the other sequels prior, none of that applied to anything. So they wanted to pump as much as they could into it, which, let's be honest, Halloween Kills wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't a great movie. But yes, I think the kills kind of take away from the film in itself, because in the original film, he really didn't kill that many people, but the way that he killed the people, the gaps in between, that's what added to the overall feel of the film. I get where you're coming from, though. He killed all these firefighters in the beginning of it, back to back, super quick. I think if he would have walked out the back door, I think maybe 1 or 2 firefighters could have died. But to me, it kind of felt like they were trying to make it some kind of, like, what's the word I'm thinking, anti-hero type film, where Michael is the villain who's going through and, taking out who he thinks the bad guys are. It's almost like an action movie at that point.
Cutting into my job, which makes me go back to when you say, the fact that Michael had to make up for all these kills, but who really goes into the movie theater thinking, I can't wait to watch Michael Myers kill his 120th kill in this movie? That's not what you go for. It's more of you go to see the story, and that story just disappointed me in a lot of reasons, but the gore was just overkill. And I can watch those types of movies and not be affected because of the real life horrors that I see every day. But it seemed like the story got lost in translation. And I also think that Laurie could have totally kicked his butt a little bit better than she did with all of the years that she trained to kick his butt.
Well, I'll disagree with you just a little bit on one thing, because there are certain films that people do go in and they expect a high kill count.
Monsters.
No, not necessarily. Another franchise that you don't like that I know people are gonna write me hate mail for because you don't like it, Friday the 13th.
He just cannot survive that many times.
Well, there's a few Halloween films where you'd be surprised how Michael survived what he survived. But the thing is
he's a badass.
Not every Friday the 13th is great. You know, there are some things in some of the films that make them not necessarily a great story, but you've got Jason doing what he does best, killing horny teenagers. And the way that he does it, the brutality of it all, people go in to watch that, and that's what they want to see.
Horny teenagers on the moon? That doesn't, that goes to the concept of doing so many reruns.
They didn't go on the moon.
It was on a spaceship. It doesn't matter. The
It
point
does.
is, you do so many reruns about something, you lose the story. Now, the first Friday the 13th, even the second, maybe the third would have been a decent story for them. But to constantly remake a character and change the story to different settings, or, it doesn't make for a good movie franchise.
Well,
there's a lot that could have been done with Friday the 13th. Like, you could have followed different characters. They could have done what Michael Myers is now doing and just cutting all of the sequels off and starting anew.
And they're talking about that. They're talking about doing that.
They ruined it when they took him to the moon.
Yeah, but the thing with all of that a lot of people don't realize, there's just about as many Halloween films as there are Friday the 13th. There's quite a few Nightmare on Elm Street films. There's quite a few Hellraiser films.
I've never watched that.
But the thing is all of those franchises have a lot of films. But I get where you're, and I've had this conversation on a previous show. Rehashing a franchise it's a tricky business. Going to different settings, trying to do different things. It's risky, and sometimes it doesn't pay off. But trying to get a big kill count and making it rushed like they did in Halloween Kills, I'll agree with you on that all day, because I thought really similarly to how you did at the theater when we watched it. It was Michael's just walking by random people, and every random person he walks by, he's jabbing with a knife. That's how it felt. I don't think it was a bad movie, but I think him trying to kill everybody constantly kind of took away from it, which it was, 2018? That was when the one come out that we saw?
Yeah.
Before that, it was 2018. That was, that version of Halloween, which was, the direct sequel to the original one. That one had a decent amount of kills, but the story of that one, it progressed in a way that the kills weren't overbearing. And I think that did that film a lot of favors. But I know you had mentioned to me too, off-screen kills. You think that should be more of a thing. Maybe the less we see, the more buildup that has.
Well, and it gives the audience time to use their imagination for what the kill could have been. It gives the franchise the opportunity to make those sequels without constantly rehashing the same storyline, because eventually you're going to run out of settings. You're going to run out of kills. If Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy kept up with their kill counts, there's nothing left in the world. And then you're out of a story. Like, what? Does Michael Myers and Jason fight each other at that point? Like, on a barren earth where there is no one else to even witness it? But there's only so many people in the world that
Don't
you can
go giving
around.
the studios ideas.
There's only so much and so many people in the world for you to be slashing. What, do they go to Japan next? Do they go, to Russia? That's, I don't know, the idea of a good kill doesn't mean over excessive. You can have a good kill even on camera, and it can be gory to give some of the audience, the ones who go there for the gore, that factor. It can be messed up, it can be twisted, but it doesn't have to be all about that and the amount of blood that's spilled on stage.
Yeah. Now, speaking of off-screen kills and things like that, Steven and I had talked about this. I'll get your opinion on it. We talked about gore in films, and like I said, we just touched on it. But one of the things that we said that we kind of agreed on was don't overdo the gore too much in the film. That way, when you do have a big kill in the film, something major that might be extremely gory, that payoff is greater because the shock value of it is through the roof. Would you say that would be kind of a factor for you? Like if you watch a movie and the killer's just jab, you see some people die off, some people died off screen, and then you get that one really brutal kill that you see, is that gonna get more of a reaction out of you, you think?
Well, it kind of goes back to spoiler alert if you've never watched Halloween Kills. But I think the last kill in that movie of Laurie's daughter was overshadowed by the amount of times that Michael had killed people. And I get he was frustrated, and he had basically been almost burned alive, and he got out. And some people's anger, I guess, could lead them to go on a mass killing, but that's not what I think of when I think of Michael Myers. And so when you got to that last kill, which was the stage set for the next movie, and it's been overpowered and by all those other kills, it was shocking, but it could have been more of a shock.
Yeah.
And so I think it kind of goes to the idea that you do lose that shock value if you just kill a bunch of people. And then I've lost interest because I don't want to see that. That to me takes away the story, and that might be a different opinion than most people have. But if I'm going to the movie to watch a horror movie star kill a bunch of people,
horror royalty,
yeah, then I want to see good kills. I don't want to see wasted kills. I want to see Michael taking out the people who he missed before. I want to see Michael getting that last stab in on Laurie, but I don't want him to be killing random people in their kitchens, to be killing the firefighters who were putting out the fire. I mean, yes, a few would have gotten in his way as he was leaving. That is more believable than him just going on a crazy spree and killing everyone.
Well, and in the beginning of Kills, when he gets out of the house, he goes to the other house to basically regroup, get back to some level that he needs to get to. And obviously there's people at the house and they get in his way. Those kills kind of drug on a little bit. That was the one with the butcher block, and that could have been a quick boop, you're done, boop, you're dead. Like that could have easily been that factor. Michael, to me, he's one of those characters. There's a lot of complexities there. Like even in the first movie, I never felt like he was going to hurt the kids that were in the first film. I didn't think he was really going to hurt them, that he was more so searching for the babysitter, for Laurie's character, and he was killing like the older kids. And then, they did the twist in the movie, well, in the franchise, where he ended up going after his niece, who was a child. And like back when that happened, that was a big twist. But they've never had a ton of gore in any of the films. I know, and I always bring this up, in the first movie, he kills a dog named Lester. And, to some people, that's like a thing. That's one thing I'll give Jason credit. That's another thing that's been talked about on the show before. Jason doesn't really kill animals, it doesn't seem like. And, I think they try to add the gore to it because sometimes it's a lack of creativity. They can't come up with a creative kill, so they think if I make it extremely gory, it's going to be, more of a shock to the fans. That's one reason why, and I bring this up all the time too, I bring up Nightmare on Elm Street. That's one thing where Freddy is a lot different. It doesn't have to be just gore, because there is gore in the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but Freddy's a dream. He can do anything you can think of. He turns into a giant snake and tries to eat somebody. He turns into a puppet, and he walks a kid on puppet strings. He sucks the air out of a girl, causes her to have an asthma attack. those are creative kills. They're not overly gory, but they still get the point across. Another example, a movie that you've not seen where stuff pays off, the first Terrifier film. I watched the second one. The second one is full of gore. Come to expect it, but that's one of those movies I went into it knowing it was going to be gory. And I think if you go into a movie knowing it's going to be gory, you have a better chance of making it through it. But the first Terrifier, it had some scenes in it that were pretty hard to watch, but there's a scene in particular where he saws a girl in half, and it's a brutal scene. When I first watched the movie, I wasn't, in so much shock that I didn't want to watch it. I was just like, oh crap. Like that was my first thought when I saw it happen. But there was a build up to it. I think that's the biggest thing. You have to have that build up. And some films do it really well. Other films, not so much. I feel like we're just dogging on Halloween right at the moment. Like I feel like we're really dogging on it.
It's not just Halloween, but then again, my experience with these types of movies is very low, and I'm more attuned to watching Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger, and because I can expect what they're going to do, and I get pretty good at telling what is going to happen in a movie. It's the same way when I read books. There's not much that can surprise me when I am reading or watching something. So to get that last surprise in can be difficult. So when I, watched Michael Myers and I saw him kill Laurie's daughter, that surprised me. That was like, yes, I knew he wasn't dead, but to be back in that room with the daughter at that point was something that they worked up to.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think like gore is necessarily a lack of creativity. There's only so many ways you can kill someone.
True.
And all of the movies have done those ways over and over and over again. And it's like you're beating a dead horse. It's just, you can only do something so much. And with those franchises that have been around for so long, it's not surprising that they have to go more to the gore side because they're out of ideas. Freddy, as you mentioned, could do anything. But again, he would run out of ideas eventually. Everyone gets to that point. It's just, what do you do when you get to that point? And I think you should take more thought and time in your kills. Michael Myers, to me, was always a stalker. He didn't just go on a rampage to kill.
Yeah.
He had a specific target in mind, and he did what he needed to do to get to that target. And if it meant killing the people in his way, he would do it.
Yeah.
Which is not unusual. But it's just to be on this mindless rampage was unusual.
Yeah.
So I think some gore just doesn't make sense. I know some people go for that kind of thing, and it doesn't deter me. I have a strong stomach, but you kind of need a story.
Yeah. I think too with the gore, especially in today's audience, the world we live in now, people are a lot more morbid than they used to be. Things in the 80s that were considered gory and too extreme are nothing today. You can find that stuff on TV, on a regular television channel. Some of the gore that they put out into films now is next level. And again, I'm not against gore at all. I have some movies that I love that have buckets and buckets of blood in them. But the films that I enjoy the most, the gore's not necessarily extreme, but again, I'll mention that movie that you love so very much, Friday the 13th. Jason's killed a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but the gore has always been pretty tame in those films.
Yeah, there's not a lot of blood.
It's like one of my favorite kills in any of the films. Jason's in the camper and they're driving down the road. He's in an RV and he pulls the girl into the bathroom and he pushes her face into the mirror. And it shows on the outside of the RV. It shows like the impression of her face coming out because he pushes her face through so much. You don't see anything. You don't see blood. You don't see the gore. But you know that it makes you think that probably was really painful the way that girl died. And I think that's one thing where less gore helps the audience. And when you don't see a kill necessarily on screen, it makes you wonder how that character died. And I think it makes you really worry, and it gets your blood going a little bit. It gets that fear. Somewhere where I think gore works and this is kind of off of the movie train here real quick, but The Walking Dead. So we spend all these seasons with these characters, and when they first introduced Negan, Negan gets everybody sat down, and he kills Abraham and he kills Glenn. Two characters that everybody really grew to love. And when he kills them, their deaths are pretty gory for TV. Like, you know, he hits Glenn so hard his eyeball pops out of his head, and he beats his head in until there's nothing left. You know, he does that to him and to Abraham. It's a brutal scene, like extremely brutal. But because those were characters, and because those were characters that people loved, and because they built that story up all around those people, you had a connection to them, and seeing them die like that and seeing the brutality of it really added to the emotion.
And it goes back to this, disclaimer, I don't like The Walking Dead. I sound like I don't like anything on here. But it also goes back to this idea that there's some scenes where you have to have the gore. If you are beating someone with a bat covered in barbed wire and you do not see blood, I'm going to be like, you can tell that's a fake scene. So in some ways, there's like the overuse of it. And then there's some where I'm like, there's no blood. And it takes away from the scene, because then I'm like, now I know it's fake anyway, but to be drawn into a movie is what the studios are trying to accomplish. And when you don't give me that gore and some of the needed gore scenes, it takes me out of the movie, and I'm like, okay, now I'm done. Or a TV show. I'm like, yeah, now I'm done.
Now, would you say that, and this is just how I feel, I bet, I'm not sure if you would be on this same thought process as I am, piggybacking off what you're saying with overuse and underuse of gore. I think it's just as important as the story, for the simple fact that even if it's a horror film or it's a horror TV show, it has to evoke some kind of emotion from the audience. Like, you have to have your audience emotionally invested to some degree. And if you make it over gory, they're going to be so desensitized by it that they're not going to care. Or if it's not gory like it should be, it's just going to show them the fakeness of it, and they're not going to have that emotional connection. It's just like The Walking Dead. They did a really good job on the scene where, you know, Glenn and Abraham die. They did a really good scene with, you know, the scene was perfect. The gore was amazing. Like, you legitimately thought that these characters were dying in front of you. And for a lot of people, that really evoked emotion because of the realistic aspect of it.
I'll cry at a TV show. I have no shame.
No, I know. But do you know where I'm coming from? Like, you have to have that emotion put out there to the audience, even if it's a horror film.
If you don't make me cry, I'm gonna, you know. I get very attached to my characters. That's probably why I dislike movies in the way that I do, because I don't think there's enough time to get attached to the characters and for me to have that emotional response to those specific characters. You know, and we go back to Michael Myers. It's always been Michael Myers and it's been Laurie. You know, so you get a feeling of attachment to those. But then you go to Jason and he's always killing random teenagers. There's not really one character who has been through more than one of the TV not the movies. But that's probably why I lean more towards TV shows. And it kind of goes back to, there's also good and bad seasons of TV shows. So if you go to American Horror Story, which is not so much horror as it is suspense, or, you know, sometimes
like a thriller type.
Yeah. There's some seasons I absolutely love.
Yeah.
You know, like Freak Show is really good. I love Twisty. I think they did John Carroll Lynch, met him. He's an awesome person. But I think he did that character so perfectly. And the background that they gave that character was amazing and tearjerker. And at the end of it, you felt sad for him.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he had the gore. I mean, he was beating people with bowling pins. So you have a little bit of both with that. But then there's other seasons like Hotel, where Lady Gaga is just taking a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Which is like, is that really necessary?
It's not a bad season.
It's
but
not
it's
a
not
bad
the best.
season, but it's not something, you know, it could have been done better.
But
and we've not watched any of the recent seasons.
It's been a while.
Because we've struggled with this, you know, once I get Roanoke, absolutely hated it.
It drug on too long.
Yeah, I thought it went 3 episodes longer than it should have.
Yeah.
It definitely should have ended when it ended, and it would have been an okay season. I also didn't like Murder House, but...
See, I liked Murder House. I liked Asylum. My favorite season was probably Coven, but that's just because I have a crush on Jessica Lange.
Yes.
You know. And Stevie Nicks, and they were both in it.
I think it's hard, even with franchises, but especially with TV shows, to keep up the stamina. You know, you have such an expectation. It's like what they're doing with that new show, Dahmer. I don't know how I've not watched it yet, but I don't know how I feel about them expanding it. It was made for a purpose, and then it got such good ratings that now they're like, okay, let's try this again. But as you go so far out, you lose that stamina, and those shows, the ratings start to plummet because you took it too far. You know?
Well, and honestly, my thing with villains, especially even horror movie villains, is simply, I don't need some soft story for all of them. I don't need to emotionally connect to them. Sometimes I just want the bad guy to be a bad guy. Like, either give us a story to make us feel sad for them, feel bad for them, or make them a monster.
Which is kind of like what they do with Freddy Krueger. You know, he was awful human being, and then now he's an awful...
entity. Let's just say that.
So, you know, you
Dream
can't...
demon.
You have to have some background for your characters, but, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be sad. I'm going to relate more to a sad character than, you know, just an evil one.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, you have to have that background. And sometimes I feel like movies don't get that background for those characters because they're they have a certain amount of time. And that's why I prefer TV shows. And that's another thing we were going to touch on today is I prefer TV shows because you have that ability to go into the background of your characters. And you don't have to just go into the background of your evil characters. You can go into the background of everyone. And then you get that emotional attachment. So then when that kill of that one character you absolutely love happens, it's a shock.
Yeah.
And it invokes that response. And if you don't have a response to kills because you're so desensitized, I think it takes away from the moviegoer experience.
Yeah.
And of course, people are going to disagree with me, but...
Well, that's the wonderful thing about film. People can dislike and like the same things. We're all different with what we prefer to see and what we don't prefer to see. You know, I know you're not as big into the horror films as I am.
No.
You know, but there are a few that you've been like, I'll give it a try. You know, I know you won't watch Smile with me, which I already watched.
No.
A movie, I have to mention this just real quick. There's a movie series that doesn't really have a lot of gore in it. You watched the first one, okay?
Oh, yeah.
The Conjuring. The second one,
I can't watch.
You cannot watch. Tell me why. Because I know why, but I want the listeners to know why. Go ahead.
I'm weird. So, you know, my job is all about the evils of the world. And I see pretty disgusting human beings in my job. And you see pretty disgusting human beings on TV. You know, I go to, not wanting to give him too much publicity, but Daryl Brooks, who ran through a parade and killed 6 people, and he didn't even hit the brakes. You know, the only time he hit the brakes was to knock a woman off of his hood. So those, to me, are evil people we see in daily life. And so when I look at Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, I almost said Michael Jackson. Michael Myers and Jason, those are people that I'm like, those can be in real life. And so they don't bother.
Degree, yeah.
they don't bother me as much because there are already evil people in the world. With The Conjuring, I was okay with the first one. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies that I can watch over and over. The second one, it was just too supernatural, and I struggle with. I know there's evil in the world, but what else is there? And I'm not so much into someone who believes in ghosts and demons and spirits and all of it, but it could be there. And so it creeps me out to see it in a movie scene because then I'm like, I'm totally gonna, like, this is gonna be happening to me in my own head.
Yeah, you can't explain it.
And I can explain evil people, but I can't explain, you know, the nun who wants to just kill people. I haven't watched that movie either. So,
not to mention you've had some crazy experiences here at our house.
Our house is incredibly haunted. But then again, like, do I believe in it? maybe there's something over there. And it goes back to, I do like the show Dead Files. If you haven't watched that, you should watch it. Great show. I don't know if it's all real, got some insider information that not all of it is real, but a lot of it is. And it just creeps me out to think that there are things that may be watching me in my sleep, compared to just an evil person. That's something we deal with on a daily basis. So it doesn't bother me as much. But that's why I couldn't watch The Conjuring 2, because it laughs too far in that I don't know category. Because if I don't see it for myself, and I can explain anything away, but if I don't see it for myself, then it's like, no thank you. But I do like the Candyman series. Not watch the new one. Really slacking. But I do like that series.
You just have a crush on Tony Todd, I think.
Pretty cool dude too.
Yeah, he is pretty cool. Are you good? Did you see a spook? She's over here looking under the desk like, what was that?
No, there was a hair tickling me.
Or was it? Ooh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, not big on the gore. And I know you're not big on it. There's a lot of people that aren't big on it. I can take it or leave it. I enjoy some films that have it. Some films I don't think need as much as they have.
Halloween Kills.
Supernatural stuff, I absolutely love.
I can't do it.
You can't do it. There's a lot of people out there that can't.
It's funny because, though, I've watched Supernatural, the show, and that to me is like, there are some creepy episodes that I can't watch, and then there's hilarious episodes. I think they make light of it. But the movies and shows, I haven't watched Haunting of Hill House. He watched it without me. That are like that in aspect, that are more, real life and less, just they're fiction based. I think it's fiction based.
Fiction means not real. Come on, you're the book whiz here.
The more fiction based I can handle. But when you do like The Conjuring 2, which is more happens in real life.
Supposedly.
Yeah, it creeps me out.
Yeah.
Because I can't explain it. I can explain a lot of things, but I can't, when I can't explain it, then I'm like, no, I'm turning it off. I also can't watch horror movies near bedtime. 10 out of 10 will have nightmares.
Now see, I think you and Katrina would probably get along in the aspect of Katrina doesn't do the ghost stuff either, with the exception of if it's a film like Mama, where it's a spirit that's not necessarily evil, but it's a spirit that is suffering because of loss or something like that.
Well, that's kind of like the first Conjuring is based off of, the woman.
Yeah.
And she makes the mothers go crazy and kill their family. So there's a story behind that. And then it kind of goes back to, you can't have no reason behind what you're doing.
True.
And I hate when you don't tell me the reason in the first movie, because I don't want to watch the 600th movie to finally figure out in the first movie, Jim Bob was killing people because of Susie Lou. That's just,
we're not letting you name people for movies.
That's just how I gotta know. And that's probably why I enjoy TV shows, because usually you find out in the first season or in the end of that episode.
Yeah, you and your instant gratification, knowing who did it. Now, I know, because we're touching on subjects pretty quick here. There was another subject that you were sort of thinking about, something that you kind of wanted to chit-chat about. What was that?
It's less of the horror movie genre, because I don't really read or watch that stuff. But I think if you're going to take a book and turn it into anything, like a movie or a TV show...
Which works for this, yeah.
It needs to be accurate to the depiction it's giving. So, I have several series that I love, and then they turn it into a movie. And the movie's okay, but then they, go completely sideways and turn it into a TV show, and then you're wondering, like, it doesn't really follow the book. Stephen King, a lot of Stephen King's books have been turned into movies.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think you should, whatever the first depiction of that thing is the depiction that the author or the director wanted you to stick with, and to change it 600 ways for shock value or for, it doesn't really work in the theaters, then don't do the movie.
Well, I understand that some things that are written in books obviously can't be done in films. Perfect example of something that would never have flown. The It films that came out. In Stephen King's book, the kids have an orgy
Right.
down in the sewer. Not going to go over well in a movie.
You
But
can leave those little details out.
well, in the book, it's a big thing. But obviously, they knew that wasn't going to be something that would be appropriate to put into a film. Now, I agree wholeheartedly that if you're going to convert a book, and it can be anything, there's a lot of horror books that are made into movies. Like you said, Stephen King, perfect example. Stephen King's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Bring him on. Bring on the writers. When you're going to make these things that they've written into, film or TV, or if you're going to make it in that kind of media, bring the writers on. Let them consult a little bit, because guess what? They're the ones that created it in the first place. There's a show, it's not horror related. There's a show called Sandman on Netflix, and it's doing really well. It's gotten great reviews. They communicated with the creator of it, and, he basically was like, here's the stuff that, has to be in it. Here's the stuff that you can be a little bit, loose with. The Witcher, another example. Henry Cavill plays The Witcher, and he's read the books. He's a fan of them. And he's even spoken up and gone, well, that's not how it would have happened in the book. It needs to happen like this. It needs to happen like this. And they listen, It's one of those things, if the writers or the creators of these things are still alive, bring them on. Let them communicate, because they had a vision, and when the audience knows that vision is coming from the source of it, they're going to react better to it. I completely believe that without a doubt. It's just like Halloween. John Carpenter was extremely involved with Halloween 2018. He's been involved with all of them, but he was extremely involved with the 2018 version that came out, which to me, I haven't watched Halloween Ends, but to me, the 2018 version, when that came out, and we went to the theater and we saw it, I went, this is a fantastic Halloween film. Just phenomenal. There's another series that's coming to mind, and I just lost the name of it, but go ahead and give your opinion on it. I mean, am I just talking shit, or does it sound pretty accurate to you? Do you think they should involve the writers of these things in the projects when they work on them?
I think you have to, because, I have favorite series that I have read hundreds of times, and I haven't watched the TV show. So it's the Shadowhunter series by Cassandra Clare. And I have read the books hundreds of times, but I won't watch the show. And I don't think she really, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think she really gave much of an opinion on the show, and it definitely didn't take the path she wanted. So I think when you have such a diehard fan, or you have a fan base on something, then you can't just stray away from what the book depicts. And I think if you go the reverse, like a movie with a book to a book, I don't know if that's even ever been done, but if you start out with a movie and you have these amazing scenes, you can't just downplay them in the next depiction. And I think when you do, you lose that fan base. So I won't watch the TV show because it's not going to come out to what the book said. She hasn't consulted on it. So I'm not interested. You do get a different fan base, but is it really the fan base you want that you made it for? If you're making a book into a movie, you're making it for the people who love the book. And then to lose that because you don't give good accuracy to what's in the book, you lose that fan base.
True. Very true. I mean, Hollywood is a beast of its own, and everybody wants to make money. Nobody wants to pay anybody else. And sometimes you don't involve people that you should. And I think a lot of the times the studios regret it. And, it's amazing that they don't involve people. Another example, Nightmare on Elm Street's remake.
Yes.
Didn't involve Wes Craven. That thing was just great actors. They had fantastic performers in it, had a lousy script. And it was because the man who knew Nightmare on Elm Street better than anybody wasn't involved.
Yeah.
All the films he was involved with did fantastic. It's The Mandalorian, not horror related, but The Mandalorian. Star Wars, great show. People love it. George Lucas has been involved with it a little bit. The guy that created it has been involved with it. It just makes sense.
Well, and it goes back to that it's their idea. They started. You got the idea from something. Now, the movies that are not based on anything and are just creative ideas that individuals have come up with are different than those based on books, because that's someone's basically child that they have spent hours and months and years developing, and then to come in and just trash it in that manner because you either couldn't get the writer or you didn't want to get the writer or you wanted to put your own take on it, then you can't really call it what the original is called.
True, but I will also say scripts and films that were made by someone, I wouldn't necessarily say that they are too incredibly different from books. Obviously, they're written differently, but that's still somebody's baby as well. And a lot of the times when a script is written, a studio just buys the script. They cut out the middleman, and that middleman might have years and years worth of other stories that correlate with their script. I know Steven has a lot of stuff that he's worked on for years. I have a few things that I've worked on for years, including my Nightmare script. And it would break my heart if a studio just said, yeah, we'll buy the script, but we don't want you touching it. Yeah. Would I be happy to know that my movie got made? Yes. But I want to be involved because I have a direction that I think it should go. And that's all up in my brain. It's not all written out yet, but it's all up in my brain. And
he has a big head.
I do. It's unfortunate I have trouble going through doors sometimes.
It goes back to, I know that there are some things in books that can't be converted to movies. Obviously, it's a lot easier to write down a thought than it is to turn it into something, especially on a set. And I know they do some filming in real life streets and cities, but it's still hard to do those specific things in that small set that you have. Because imagine shutting down a block of New York City to film a movie. It's not easy, and it's expensive, and it causes an inconvenience for everybody in New York. So it's not easy to do some of those big details. But I think there's little details in books that people get wrong, like hair color. Why do you let an author describe a character a certain way and then you go the opposite?
True.
And I get there's some books that don't describe their characters, so you have that liberty to think about the character in whatever way you want to. And that's different. But if you give me a description of a character and then you go into the show or the movie and you don't have that character looking like that,
it throws you off.
Yeah. And then I'm uninterested.
Now, I will admit, though, studios have gotten better about taking concepts from film, from books and things like that, and putting them in film, ideas that people didn't think were going to work. Perfect example of that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Again, not horror related, but it is one of those things. They took some ideas from comics.
We don't discriminate here.
True. They took some ideas from comics that they didn't necessarily think would look good on screen, and they put them on screen because they're starting to realize, certain things need to appear in a certain way. It's like Fantastic Four when they did those movies. When they introduced Galactus for the first time, he was a big cloud, and nobody liked that. Everybody wanted to see Galactus as a giant space monster, humanoid-looking space monster with his crown and everything. I know you're lost as to what I'm saying right now. My wife's not a nerd either, people. But
I like to read. Send me book recommendations.
Yes, give us some book recommendations. That can be the horror ramblings question of the week. What horror books should Lester's wife, Samantha, read?
Yes, I love to read. I have a library. Literally, probably enough books to fill a library. I think it's past that. But also give us your ideas of books that have been turned into great movies that don't lose those little details.
Yeah, that would be a great question too.
Because I get overshadowed when I think of movies and books that have been like so far off from the books. It kind of goes back to, it's been a long time since I've read Harry Potter. And the movies themselves are a beast and they're great movies. But I don't know how exactly accurately they follow the books.
Right.
But they've also kind of turned into their own little thing.
True.
And that's great. I think it works well with that storyline.
Yeah. Well, that's just like I haven't read it completely. I have the Strain books.
I was just thinking about the book series.
Yeah, I have the Strain books because I watched...
He is taking forever to read it and I can't read it.
I watched the series,
Yes.
and I loved the series because they did vampires in a freaky way, which is fantastic. But
They don't sparkle like Twilight.
no, they don't sparkle.
There is a
Vampires should
book.
not sparkle.
There is a book called Vampires Don't Sparkle. I don't remember who it's by. We got it at a convention.
Yeah.
We like little authors.
But the Strain series is great. And from what I read in the first book so far,
He's so close to finishing
I know.
it.
I got like 3 pages and then I'm done. But from what I've read so far in the first book, they're pretty close with the series and the books. They're pretty close in execution. So yeah, I think some new recommendations would be kind of cool. That maybe we should make that the question.
There's 2 questions. We've already come up with 2 questions.
But I don't really have anything else. If you don't have anything else,
No, I'm boring.
you're
I'm
not-
only here because he asked me.
You're not boring. You just need to get some more horror in your life.
Yeah, shout out to Steven for doing this every week.
Nah.
Hopefully he gets out of his quicksand.
Out of his quicksand, is that where he is now?
Yeah, he's in
Well,
quicksand.
I think the audience out there, the listeners, might hear from him on where they can find us, because even though he's not here right now, he's in some hellscape, I am terrible at telling the people where to find us. So you guys just listen in, because I think Steven might be chiming in from the hellscape that he's in.
Well, Ramblers, you thought I was sitting this one out? Well, you can't have an outro without your buddy Steven just sitting here giving you all the deets you want to know. Let us know how you think about today's topic. Yes, I say today's topic because I don't know what it was. I wasn't there. But you can let us know on Twitter what you thought at Horror Ramblings. If you've got more to say and a tweet just won't do, send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. If you love social media groups, follow us on Facebook, join our Facebook group, and hang out with fellow horror fans like yourself. You can even find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images. Do you Discord? Then join us on Discord in the Horror Ramblers room and discuss other horror stuff with fans just like yourself. If you're feeling generous and want to support the show financially, head on over to patreon.com/pencilandpaperproductions to chuck in a buck and help this and other shows like it grow. If you want to say nice things about the show, head on over to Apple Podcast and leave us that beautiful 5-star review. You get to express your feelings and help the show grow at the same time, and you can do that very same thing on Spotify if you're so inclined, and even answer our questions and polls. It's all appreciated. But most importantly, tell your fellow horror fiends to search Horror Ramblings on the preferred podcasting platform, and if nothing else, keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience, and remember, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.